Hello, ladies and gents. Welcome to the Outlight Show, and today we're going to talk about how to handle overwhelm. Now, whenever we talk about any topic, it's that we get confused with the reverse propositions. We always get we always get ourselves differentiating, like whether this is external, whether this is internal, whether this is the anti-vision of what are we saying. So, talking about overwhelm, there are two kinds of overwhelm in general. There are overwhelm which happen because you're not doing anything, and there are overwhelm which happen because we are doing too much. Without differentiating all these things, we often get ourselves into overwhelming feeling, may it be from our external factors or internal factors. That's what we are going to dive deep into today. I'm with Anirban, my co host for today, and in our personal journey, we have been through some overwhelming situations, may it be in our personal life or professional life. Though remarkably, remarkably, I want to I don't differentiate. I don't differentiate between professional life and personal life because it's just two sides of the same coin. And if one side gets banished, then the whole coin just shifts to a different identity. And I want to introduce Anirban here because I want to know the differences between external overwhelm and internal overwhelm. How do you even know how to just, uh, in a situation whether you're facing external overwhelm or internal overwhelm, and in general about which overwhelm we are actually talking about? Is it the overwhelm that we feel when we are doing too much, or the overwhelm that we feel when we are doing nothing?
Yeah, right. So I think you brought up two important classification of overwhelm in the initial introduction. I think both of them were internal overwhelm. Like you were talking about losing yourself or being in the anxiety. I think those are the internal overwhelm, how I would classify. Now coming to the external overwhelm, I feel like it's all about information overload when it comes to external overwhelm. Because if you look at students and working professionals like us who are occasionally overwhelmed or use the word overwhelmed, I think it's more mixed feeling and it's also can be manifested differently because it's a subjective manner due to how people feel. Different people communicate different emotions when they're saying I'm overwhelmed. So let's just establish some ground first here by what I mean by being overwhelmed. I feel like when you're taking in more information from the external world, that's overwhelm. More specifically, external overwhelm. And that external overwhelm comes from excessive information overload. That can be like if you're doing lots of projects at the same time, that can be overload. If you're taking like I'm having this project, I'm having this startup, I'm studying, I'm reading more books, I'm doing all that stuff, I have a relationship. Now that starts feeling overwhelming. So this is something that comes from you having more exposure to different projects, which can be some way good, but is also impacting at the other side by giving you more information. So those kind of external overwhelm that comes is often caused by priorities. And you get messed up by your feelings that, hey, I can't just take in more. I'm unable to handle these. I don't know. I'm not making any progress at any side. Then the external factors, the external symptoms translated into an internal overwhelm. And then you start questioning your internal psyche that, hey, am I not suitable for doing these? Why can't I accomplish what I'm taking in? Those kind of now causes anxiety within you that, hey, what's the reason of whatever is happening? Why can't I do something? Why am I unable to like do anything correctly? Every external factor turns into an internal factor. And if you have a higher measure of insecurity, you carry to choose them, you carry to weigh them with your personal attributes, with your characteristics that I'm unable to do these. And you go through a period of anxiety. You start doing self comparison, you sabotage yourself. with the external factors. So all these internal and external overwhelm is somewhat interconnected. And I see that internal overwhelm can be by different reasons. If you're a person of high standards, if you don't achieve that high measure in any domain, if you think that, hey, I'm going to study 3 hours a day and still achieve the best result, even if you don't achieve the best result, but you were above the par, you will still feel that, hey, I should have achieved that big par, big level. Though I don't care, but still I should have. So these are factors that you take in internally and create overwhelm for you. But at the basis, I feel it's more information overload internally or externally, because even internally, if you look at when you're overwhelmed, when you're feeling the anxiety, it's you in your mind who is talking to yourself more. You're giving yourself information more, which is causing overload. And that's where its word genesis came from, that overwhelm, over, excessive. So I kind of see it that way. And I will get into the emotional side of it, like how different emotions are correlated to this. Because I feel like nowadays, there was a word earlier that was more popular than overwhelm. That was tension. People used to say, hey, I have a lot of tension. I am very tensed. But I feel the culture has shifted more towards like, hey, I have more overwhelm. So I would love to get into a point where we are discussing the interplay between those and how overwhelm can be good to an extent and may not be good, maybe injurious. So before that, like as you mentioned about internal overwhelm, and I feel like you've gone through some periods of anxiety yourself, I would love you to like expand more on the topic of internal overwhelm. Like, how do you see it, the actual feeling of it, and mental thought process, the mental talk.
Yeah, so regarding to the thing that the stages where I felt overwhelmed were the stages where I thought that overwhelming feelings were something that you should get rid of. It was something consciously trying to nag me, and I was getting nagged, of course, because I wasn't aware that the only reason that you are not beating up overwhelm is that you are telling yourself it's consciously that you have to get rid of it. And when it comes to people overlooking life, it's most likely that they feel that these overwhelming feelings are something to get rid of. And I've always seen that these overwhelming feelings are made to direct you towards a certain direction. May it be right, may it be wrong. So for for a huge part in my life, I thought overwhelming feeling and all this anxiety, panic attacks, all these things were something that I should get rid of. And eventually, I was hopping around in videos and tutorials and how to's about how to fix your anxiety and panic attacks. And I discovered Kapil Gupta. Kapil Gupta said this one thing that uh, you trying to get rid of anxiety is the problem. And the root of anxiety is underneath itself. It's deeply rooted into itself. And whenever I discovered it, I didn't try to anymore fixate on this thing that I have to get rid of it. And when I did that, eventually it went suddenly less. And one thing about overwhelming feelings is that I would say clarity. It's just that we don't clarify ourselves where we are in day to day. And when we don't clarify ourselves that we are in this position or in that position, we are less likely that we are going to be being content with our lives. And for most people that I know, I think they think that they have a problem, or it's always that everybody thinks that only they have this problem. But eventually, it's like no problem is personal problem and all that. So I want to ask you one thing, which is that how do you differentiate between like positive overwhelm, negative overwhelm, and how do you even like define them? To be honest, because I feel that any kind of overwhelm in the earlier stages, when it used to happen, that I would have panic attacks and all that, I used to think that these are all negative. There's nothing positive about that. But later I got to know that okay, these things are these things can be interpreted as positive things. So how do you really differentiate it?
You mentioned the fact that it's not only information overload. You can be with a lot of information, but still not be overwhelmed, not be feeling anxiety. I think it's a difference between like scattered information and organized information. Or it's kind of like all those information are the guiding force of your want, of your desire, of your 16 hours of work that you're putting in while being on the chair. This reminds me of the positive aspect of, or you can just say positive overwhelm versus negative overwhelm. How to put it is that when you're too comfortable with your life, when you're not trying things new, you're not stepping out of the ring, it's kind of like you are so used to the same experiences you're having. It's the same thing. It is safe stuff to do, to be honest. You're not taking in new information, new experiences, new tastes. When that's not happening, life starts to become dull. It starts to become boring. But you feel that and you feel like you're lost. Lost feeling and overwhelmed feeling is two different aspects, I feel. So that's, I think, the positive aspect of overwhelm, that if you're feeling overwhelmed, it can be a sign that you're doing something new. You're stepping out of the uncomfortable zone. And that overwhelm is likely because you're taking in new information, new experiences, new learnings from what you're doing. And that overwhelm is leading to some mental improvement of yourself. If I have to quote Csikszentmihalyi, he established this framework where if you're engaged in a work and it's below your competence level, you'll start getting feeling bored. But the other hand, if it's like too complicated rather than your skills, you'll start getting overwhelmed. Like, what the hell am I doing? And like, I don't understand anything. Nothing is going in my head. So it's more of the scattered feelings, scattered information that you take in, which makes you feel overwhelmed. In contrast, it's just the organizing force, clarity of mind, which I would say, and how you bring it. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, you just need to step back. I and Rohit were somewhere in step just recently where our startup was launched, the product was out there, we were receiving user feedback, and things started things soon started changing very like unlikely, as you don't expect things happening always as per your expectations. There will be, if you're an entrepreneur, this is the truth that you have to shadow yourself, that things won't be how the safe things are. If you're stepping out of the comfortable zone, things will be like these challenging and unique. So as things were not as conducive to what we had initially thought about, there were problems happening, we had to deal with them differently, and we started feeling very overwhelmed by the information we were receiving, that hey, this is going wrong, that is going wrong, we are messed up, how can we fix this, we don't have time, users are leaving, our acquisition rate is reducing rate by margin. So we kind of felt like, okay, let's do that, let's fix that, we have to bring them in. So it's kind of like a pull game we were playing, that hey, user going away, we were trying to like pull them in with a thin rope. That's how I see it, as that we were overwhelmed, and that's why we like kept doing what we were doing. And that was the main flaw, that the clarity of mind would have come because we didn't have the time to just sit back, just to wait for a moment and look at things from a third person point of view. As never we can say that most of the problems you have is the result of you not having some minutes for you, not having the minutes to think about it. So I felt like our overwhelm was caused only by the reason that we didn't sit properly to step back and look at things from a non-biased point of view. Like, hey, what's happening? Why is it happening? What are the root? What can be the core thing that we can do to stop things happening from what we don't want? So the clarity of mind that can be brought here is a result of our strategic thinking. And that can come when you give your mind the space to be slightly void. Your mind, your mind will never turn off. We are like, we grew up in a way that we are constantly talking. Unless we are in sleep, we are just talking to ourselves all the time, unless we are sharing those thoughts with someone else. But at the same time, if you can just turn it off, by turn it off, I'm meaning dimming it off For example, in meditation, you just try to dim it. You just try to slow it down, the rate of speech. You just try to like focus on less things and focus on behavioral stuff, like focusing on your breath. So giving that space, giving that void, you start connecting the dots. You start connecting the information you have, like, hey, that's going wrong, that's going wrong. Why is everything going wrong? What's the core? What's the one domino that's causing the domino effect? And when you start identifying those, then you start feeling that, hey, it wasn't such a big thing. I was like making it a big thing. And that's exactly it. That's how you find the clarity of mind. And I think, practically speaking, the core habit that I found here very helpful is that writing, because I feel that creates some space in your mind. When you're talking too fast, and that's why you are overwhelmed by yourself. But when you're writing, you have a limited speed. You can't like write in a razor's speed, so you have time to process what you're writing and understand like, hey, why am I writing this? Of course, if you are just any beginner writer, you don't have to be any philosophical writer even. If you're writing, you will give it some sort of structure and some sort of flow. And that's why you feel kind of clarity. Just take a pen and paper and write 2 page about something you are doing currently. If you're a student, just write about your HSC or SSC, whatever the exam might be. Just write about, hey, what is this? What am I doing? Is there any tension I'm feeling? Is there an overwhelm I have? Just write about it, 2 page, and just weigh the emotions after the writing period. That's clarity, and that clarity is given to you by the writing that you did. So I feel like this is exactly the positive side of things that I see in the overwhelm. It's not overwhelm, it's new information that's improving you. How has this been for you? Like, you mentioned that you had like anxiety that was like, hey, Elon Musk is doing that, I'm not doing that. So were those comparisons or kind of benchmark, you can say that they set that benchmark for you that you have to do this, but you're not doing that? He invented this by the age of 18 and you are still in your mother's room at the age of 18. So these kind of anxiety that comes in, so how do you deal with them, or how do you approach them?
That was a good point, actually, because I think to a certain extent we tend to believe that success has some internal age barriers, which they don't in general. And whenever you think about these things, like that 18 years old achieved some software that automatically delivers you tissue paper when you run out of it, all these things are genuinely good for us because we want to take all these things. If you have read on the chapter Courage from my book, I would say that you just need the courage to hop on it and you'll just do fine. But you have to gather the courage first, and you have to actually consciously tell yourself that, hey, this is something that I am taking on. And dealing with this overwhelming feeling that I'm not successful enough, we can always blame our parents, blame where we were born, blame our circumstances, consequences around us. But it's always that we take the responsibility of us, and that's the thing that should happen in the first place. Now, getting back to the days where I used to feel overwhelming feelings, I held a man's search for meaning, where Viktor Frankl just clearly said that what is to give light must endure burning. So it was very clear for me that every suffering had a meaning. And I often forget some videos or things that I did previously. And even now I go back to the days and read my book, and I see that some verses were written at the time when I was feeling something, and I don't feel that right now, and I can resonate with that sentence enough. Like that day, I was roaming around my book, and I found this one quote, of course written by me, and I still don't know why did I write it. I just found it. Eventually, I liked it. It was something like someone wrote it for me, and it was very exponential. The quote basically was, if you try to think differently, you think differently, and when you think different, you become different. So that was the line. And three profound verses: try thinking differently, think differently, be different. So that was kind of the quote that was simplified in that manner. I used to make videos a long time ago. Now, in the videos, I used to talk about certain self improvement things where I talked about this one single thing: suffering has a meaning. Let's say an incident happened to you that a plane crashed on you, which is a very miserable thing if you didn't know. So, a plane crashed on you, and uh, isn't that like, can you do something about it? You can't, of course. A plane crashed on you, you probably would be dead, or otherwise you take the responsibility of yourself. So any suffering is not can be compared to the things that diminish you, and they just manage you from the whole world. It just doesn't happen pretty often, and we ruminate about all these things when we do, and these pain miseries, they don't have a meaning in certain people's lives, and that's why they are called pain or suffering. It's a definitional problem, I'd say. So as they are called suffering, they are treated as suffering. I would say that any problem isn't a problem until it's treated as one, and that's not what I have been believing for a while. And it's just that I feel like everything is cliche. As having zero personality, I would say, like, yeah, I can roam around the topic how I am a zero and I don't have any ideology in my mind. Of course, I have ideologies, but they are like self chosen, and they are not adopted from any kind of cultural BS, of course. And it's just foundations that we talk about all the time. And it's very profound that my mind knows how to differentiate reality. And when you have taken on several ideologies with your mind, you just happen to be discovering things as seeing the facade behind them. Like the people who are like going day to day, they might feel overwhelmed because they know too much. But if you actually know too much, then why are you unhappy? This was the one single thing that was pointed out from Neval's uh, happiness podcast. It was something like, many entrepreneurs in my industry would say, I don't want to be happy because I want to be successful. Partially true, but who said that you can be happy while being successful? And also, lots of crowds out there would say that I don't want to be happy. No, they are not happy because they know too much. Yeah, partially true. You are unhappy because you know too much and can see behind the facade of everyday life. But if you're so smart, if you know too much, then why are you unhappy? And that's something that nagged me a lot. And I would think everything is a cliche because nothing is real after all. All these things, external feelings and all that. I read in Mark Manson's book, which was such a lot of not giving a fuck, which had introduced to me this insight that you can react, you can choose how you react based on situations uh, without being controlled by them. If someone just kept a 1-year-old baby in front of your door and is crying like hell in front of your home, you choose what to do with it. You can overreact and like feed it to a bulldog. Sorry, I don't know whether it's going to be censored in YouTube or not, but it's just that you choose how to react. And when our software got launched, yeah, so Anirban and I launched a software, also another founder. Now, when we launched software, this was this cliche feeling that I was supposed to feel overwhelmed, like I couldn't just let go of things, and that's how things are supposed to be. I'd say so. That was the case, and I feel like these are the cliches that you are fed on. Like when someone dies in your life, you are supposed to cry. When someone like is hurt, you should try to comfort them, even though they have a little to do with your well-being. Actually, now several conjectures and cliches, I think, and they should relate with most of our lives because we are fed on cliche. What do you think about all these things? Like when cliches take over our mind, that we are supposed to do this thing even when we are not feeling about it.
Great point. Amazing. Yeah. And yeah, I do agree that you don't need to agree to the cliches that you have to feel overwhelmed, and that's why you're feeling overwhelmed because of that. And I feel this cliche applies generally very much to the student world we're surrounded by as well. You are told by your seniors that, hey, HEC is gonna like fuck you up. You are not gonna get you the time to shower. Bro, we are showering every day. We are clean. We are handsome. Like what? So it doesn't have to be that you have to always be just because you're supposed to be like that. No, you can like challenge the norms out there. And this reminds me another idea that we can get in as the last topic of the day. That what's the like boundary? I feel like more people and more people are kind of telling that they're overwhelmed, they're busy, they're like misinterpreting busyness and with overwhelmed. So they don't have a business. I think this busyness came from the word business. So they don't have the business in their life, but they are telling they're busy. So which is contradictory. But the point is that they are telling that they're overwhelmed, they have so much to do. But if you look at their life, it's just that they're just studying. The core aspect, if you peel it off, it's just that they're studying. It might be different that, hey, I'm going to 8 coaching centers and all that stuff. You know how much time that takes. But fundamentally, at the root, you just have one aspect to tell after 2 years from now that, hey, I prepared for HEC. That's it. No other thing. It doesn't fucking matter. Like if you studied at 8 coaching or you did 12-hour study or 8 hour study, you'll get out with some outcome. You will be with it for some years. For some people, the outcome doesn't even matter. For some, it matters, depending on what route you're taking in life. My question here is that these kind of people are kind of telling that they're also overwhelmed by the priorities they have. So, what boundaries are we establishing over here? That is this like if you're doing a lot of stuff, that's when you're supposed to be feeling overwhelmed, or you are like the student thing and you're overwhelmed. So, how do you like classify these things and these nuances?
Even for the students, I would say that I'm not sabotaging yourself or anything like that, but it's true that the people who are not doing enough feel that they are doing enough, and the people who are doing enough feel that they are not doing enough, and that's why they keep doing more. So that's kind of the paradox that we face around the world. It's just that the things that are the way it is, like the people who don't do something think they that they are doing something, and the people who are doing something don't think that they are doing enough. So that's the kind of paradox that people fall into. As you were, as I interpret that the listener would be a student, I would say that someone who's a student, let's say, they've got bunch of things to do, things to handle, and when they feel that they haven't done enough for the day, it's mostly that uh, they have done enough and they're just over uh, overthinking about it in general. So I think it in that manner. Uh, I think Anirban could relate more about the entrepreneurial, like all these things that we side up on, like doing something and not doing something, whether we're doing enough or not. All these things, right?
Exactly. With we being entrepreneurs and others we see, it's more like even if we do a lot, we feel like we are not doing enough. And we continue to do more and more, and we fall into the positive overwhelm side, which actually grows ourselves. So it's more like juggling 10 things. We might drop two or three, but at the end of the day, we still juggled seven or six, something like that. So it's the positive aspect. So, and I do appreciate your point on some people feeling that they are doing enough, but actually they are just stuck in a loophole or they are just in a rabbit hole. So, yeah, I do agree on that. And I feel like, on practically speaking, if someone is overwhelmed, it's the only point that can help them is clarity of mind that can be brought only when you give yourself more time, when you stop and think about it. These might sound not that technical or not even like not too fancy workshops to do, but this is mainly how smart people are carrying on with their life is that they think, they pause and analyze the situation And depending on those, depending on the factors, they can take the further actions. When you can see yourself from a third person point of view, a lot of things can change in your life. And that's exactly one of the remedy for nullifying overwhelm in your life as well. So I see it that way. And if you're a student, one of the core reasons probably behind your overwhelm would be time management. And some time management is something that we've been discussed very closely in our last episode. So if you would love, you can just watch it right in the third three icons or whatever that shit is called in YouTube. So just have a look, and that's mainly for today. So yeah, thanks for watching Two Outliers.